Hi, Nick. Nice to meet you. My name is Alfonso, here on behalf of the Mexican blog slash YouTube channel Retumba. Thank you for joining me today. How are you, man?
Good, man. Mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto.
Yeah.
Well, I invited you today here because Job For A Cowboy returns with Moon Healer,
Aye.
um, a title reminiscent of their previous album, Sun Eater.
Right.
So my first question right away is, does this album title signal a seamless continuation from where the band left off?
I think so, man. I mean, we really kind of specifically wanted to make this record be a sequel to Sun Eater.
Mm,
We knew that even back, like, pretty much, I mean, at least as early as 2016 when we went and played our one show world tour for Sun Eater in Vancouver, BC. And we were talking then, and I remember some of these songs even existing all the way back then. Um, and we knew it was going to be like a sequel, that we wanted to do it that way. And so it wasn't until, I mean, I think somewhere around 2018ish or something like that. I remember talking, or 2017 maybe. I was talking to my buddy out in California, and he was like, "Dude, you got to call the next record Moon Eater." And I was like, "Oh shit, that's fucking sick." So I told Johnny that, and he was like, the moon part's cool." He's like, "But we got to come up with something different, you know?" So he came up with Healer. But so yeah, it's, I mean, like, musically a continuation of Sun Eater, thematically, and the concept, the character's story is also moon. This it's the same world, you know, and they were designed to work with each other. And I feel like we're trying to take Sun Eater and just push it as far as we could in every direction. So we wanted moodier parts. We wanted like even more kind of weird ethereal tones, futuristic tones, if you will, and crazier bass, crazier drums. I mean, it's kind of cliche to say that stuff, but there was a limit too, because Sun Eater was
yeah.
specifically designed. We specifically made Sun Eater less busy than like Demonocracy or Ruination.
Yeah.
So then that was like, there's kind of like a ceiling. It's like, okay, we want to make it like, you know, fast parts, crazy parts, heavy parts, right? But like we're not trying to go backwards and be like, now there's 45 riffs in every song again. You know what I mean?
I do agree with all of that, honestly.
Cool.
And I'm eager to have an open conversation about all about it. But
Sure.
first, I want to ask you about your passion or your love for playing music, extreme metal, from playing bass. Yes, and yeah, what were the things that motivated you at first to play music?
At the very beginning, I can even remember like specific riffs, like
Hmm.
the intro to One, Metallica. Dun, da, dun, da,
Okay.
dun, da, dun, da. Just that, I was like, that's cool. That's so cool sounding. And my cousins were the ones that kind of really introduced me to metal and a lot of music, really. Chili Peppers and Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains and all this stuff. And they were like a little older, and they played, you know, they got a guitar and they were playing guitar, and it was like cool. You know, you were like, oh man, this is like, it was just awesome. I remember reading, like, it wasn't Musician's Friend, maybe it was, all the way back in, you know, early 90s, and you'd get the
Mm,
catalog and like look through and like, oh, there's the Kirk Hammett, you know.
yeah.
But so yeah, so I got a guitar in like 5th grade. But I just kind of, I don't know, I just don't think I fell in love with the guitar the way that I fell in love with bass.
Mm,
And so I was slow going on the guitar. I mean, it took me till like, you know, really till like probably, I'd say like 12th grade even, you know, till I was like, you know, actually kind of proficient enough to like write my own stuff. And but we could never find a bass player. My drummer, Greg Williams, and I started a band together, and we could never find a bass player. You know, it's kind of a common problem because it's not really a glamorous instrument. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah.
people care about vocals first, you know, then guitars, then drummer, then bass. You know, you're at the bottom of the hierarchy as far as importance level to the fan, I guess. So, but for me though, like we one time, my buddy Greg picked me up, and he had this record LD50 from Mudvayne,
Okay.
and we just drove and put it on, and we're just blown away by how prominent how present and how vocal the bass playing was on that record. And it that from that moment forward, I was like, I'll play. I'm gonna play bass. And I was like, what's he play? And I got what he played, and I'm like, oh, burp burp ding, burp burp ding. You know what I mean?
So it was a combination of that experience with that album, and also you discovering that was like a special kind of necessity playing bass.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was just like as soon as I picked it up, my brother always had the bass. So when I got a guitar, my brother got a bass at the same time, and I always loved picking it up and doing the stupid Paul Rudd slap of the bass, man. But you pick a bass up and you slap it.
Yeah.
It's fun. And I should try to get that bass back. It got stolen from me a long time ago. I should try to get another one of those because it was like a PV Cirrus, I think it was. It was a cool bass. But anyways, so I'd always liked it. I was always around, and I always had fun picking up. You know what I mean? And playing with it. But then after that record, and like specifically deciding to become a bass player, and I bought it was a Warwick Masterman, Warwick Fortress Masterman, and it was just this amazingly sounding instrument. It looked cool, and I really fell in love with it. You know what I mean? Like I to this day, like I love playing bass. I love having a bass in my lap. I like when I'm watching shows, I have a bass in my hands.
Wow.
It's not plugged in, but like I love the feel of it. I love the sounds that it makes, and that you can kind of consistently grow on it, and it never gets old. So I think like when you fall in love with something like that, it makes it easier to get better, faster.
Definitely.
I think that's like with any hobby, with anything. If you love it, you're going to do it more often, and you're going to put more effort into getting better at it.
And what made you took further steps into getting better and heavier with music? And for example, you at some point started to play for Cephalic Carnage,
Right?
Which, I mean, huge band.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. That was a kind of an interesting thing. So that band that I started with my my buddy Greg and my other buddy Brendan Burke was 2 basses, drums, and vocals. It's called Aim Matter, right?
Okay.
And no regular guitars. And because we kind of figured like, well, if you think about like the Mudvayne sound, right? Like you have when you go up high, right? Then the low end is missing, and Ryan does a great job of making sure he doesn't live up there. He just pops up and he fills the low end out. But we thought, would it be cool if a bass could stay up in the higher register, and then you have a second bassist holding down the low end, right? And then we play parts together and mix it up. So anyways, that band started to do pretty well in the local scene in Colorado here, and I kind of got a name for myself, I guess, enough so that it caught the attention of this guy Sherwood Weber. Sherwood is the singer of a band called Skinless.
Okay.
And Sherwood moved to Denver to start, just for a lot of different reasons, but one of the things he was doing was going to start a side project with Zach Joe from Cephalic Carnage. And so Sherwood was doing lights, I think, at the Ogden Theater in Denver, and he was doing lights for my band, Ain Matter. And so he saw it, and then I had kind of known Zach because he worked across the street from me when he was home from touring. And I ran into Zach on the street after work one day, and he was like, "Hey, Sherwood saw you. He's like, you got to be the bass player for our side project." And I was like, "Well, okay." And he's like, "It's not going to take away from Ain Matter." But so as it turns out, like a month later, Josh quit Cephalic Carnage. And so I got a call from Zach on my phone. I had lost my phone, so I was checking my voicemail at work. And they basically made me try out for a couple months. It was kind of there was like a 3-month tryout. And I had to go do a couple shows, and there was another guy that was trying out at the same time. And they ended up picking me, and I kind of went that route. So I had never really been like that extreme as far as like the blasting and the grinding and all that kind of stuff. We had some of it in Ain Matter, and there were elements of death metal, but it was probably closer to like hardcore or deathcore than it was death metal.
Okay.
And then from there, touring with Cephalic and getting into that whole world led me to we toured with this band Despised Icon, and Al Glassman was playing with Despised Icon at the time. We became friends. So then I went to I was doing like a fill-in gig, like a session gig, and I remember I was doing it specifically because John Rice from Job for a Cowboy was the other name, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll do that with you. And so John Rice and I met then, and then same thing, like less than a month later, Brent, the bass player from Job for a Cowboy, quit.
Okay.
So then I joined Job for a Cowboy. So I've never like quit any of these bands. I just kind of keep moving on to the next one and the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the opportunities
but it's been an interesting
up.
journey for sure, man.
Interesting.
Right.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Yep. And then go ahead. Sorry.
No, please continue.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, that's kind of how I got into Havoc as well. Same thing. Like had toured with Havoc it was Suffocation, Fall of Carnage, Havoc, and Fallujah. And when Job for Cowboy went on our long break the last 10 years, David asked me to join Havoc, and then so went and did that. And it's kind of interesting that it's just like life, right? Everything just leads you to the next thing, and you never know what's next. So that's why you always got to keep going. You know,
it's a continuous momentum. As you mentioned, your band Ain't Matter. It caught my attention that you say that it was two basses, no guitars. There are not many examples of bands doing this kind of thing. I can think maybe of a couple ones.
Yeah.
But at the time, I guess it was pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
What motivated you to do this sort of thing?
We kind of like, we were literally, I think we were like almost anti-guitar. You know what I mean? Because it's like, especially hearing like what Mudvayne did with LD50, and realizing that like the bass is this sort of hyper underutilized awesome sound, especially to play in the upper registers and just bring out all these different kind of moods and that stuff. And so then you go and you listen to every other metal record, though not every other metal record, that's a little hyperbolic, but bass in general is not as present.
Yeah.
You have to kind of dig to hear what it's doing, and a lot of times it's just doubling what the guitar's doing. So it's almost like you could just put a pedal on, a bass pedal adds a little thickness to your guitar tone, and you don't even need a bass player. So we kind of like, I think it was like maybe a little bit of a trying to fly in the face of that, is to be like, we're gonna fucking have just fucking bass then, no guitars. We call them high-pitched squealers. But then it was funny because then I ended up being like, wow, but that sound is great and thick and heavy. So I started playing, I strung up a bass with lighter strings. So it was A, D, G, C, F, and the F string was plain steel. So it was like kind of halfway between a bass and a guitar's gauges. And then I'd play that through like a Mesa Boogie guitar amp. And so we had this big giant sound. It was kind of like what 8 strings eventually came out to be. But we had that sound way back in 2004.
And do you think that these experiences and or experiments somehow influence you or give you like a clear vision to what your instrument could offer? I don't know, for Cephalic Carriage at the time, or then Job For A Cowboy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wanted to bring it. I think that's partially why I got into Cephalic, is they knew that Sherwood saw me, and then Zach had come and see me, and John Merriman had come to a couple Ain't Matter shows as well. And I think that they were like, cool, they wanted to add that element of like, more technical bass playing into their sound. Because Josh, the previous bass player, was fucking one of the most entertaining guys on the planet. But he really was more of a guitar player that was just playing, this really cool fretless bass sound that he had, but it wasn't very technical, and so they wanted to like kind of, I don't know, bring some Iron Maiden in or something, So I kind of like always had this sort of role that I was going to take with bass, where I'm like, I'm going to, I'm not just going to match what the guitar's doing, like I'm going to say something else, Yeah,
so the perspective of a bassist player at heart is very important, besides, playing guitars. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in this conversation, it is my intention to build a sort of narrative into Job For A Cowboy to the years.
Yeah.
But of course, from your perspective. Well, I try to connect the past and the present for the audience here.
Sure, yeah.
And, well, I understand that this might seem old for you,
Oh,
But
it's all good.
what was your opinion for Job For A Cowboy before you joining the band?
At first, it was one of those things where we kind of looked at them. Ultimately, it was jealousy. I would say, but this band comes out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and they're using this website, where if you wanted to get success as a band in before 2004, 2005, you had to hit the streets. You had to go pass out flyers, put flyers up everywhere. You had to go to shows to support other bands, and those bands would then come to your show and bring the fans, and you had to like kind of really grind really, really hard. And if you wanted to get known regionally or even internationally, like you had to go tour. You had to like go make it happen. So then this website, MySpace, comes out, and this band of 16-year-olds, puts like 4 songs up on there and just fucking blows up. You know what I mean? Like, they were really like the first example of the potential virility of using the new using this medium, the internet, to get your music to a much, much, much wider audience than ever would have been possible had they had to go do it, the long, hard way. So I think there was sort of like a little bit of to the outside perspective in death metal world, it kind of felt like they were getting I want to say like it felt like spoiled or something, maybe is the word I'm looking for. I'm trying to find the word where it's like they like didn't earn it. So people were like, what the fuck are they doing so high up on these bills? Right. And everybody's just the hottest shit in the world, and they don't even have it. They had an EP out, maybe. They don't even like, oh, this band, it's like, man, this band's been out for fucking 15 years. They got 10 fucking records out, and this other band comes along and you're like, but I think in retrospect, then I remember listening to the Doom EP and being like, this is pretty cool. I don't know. I was like, the 16-year-olds wrote this. There's no way I would show you what I wrote when I was 16. You know what I mean? Like, Johnny fucking, that was great. So then, and then like they immediately started to make this transition away from, the haircuts like this and the wearing your sister's jeans and all that. And you could tell that, Johnny did have like real super legitimate death metal roots. His knowledge of music is just so vast. And so they immediately kind of wanted to, I think, separate themselves from the scene that they like created.
Definitely.
And so that's where like, okay, now we get Genesis, and I think that was like a blatant statement of like, okay, there's no breakdowns. There's no bass drops. There's no pick squeals, no breeze. Like they really wanted to be like, no, we're death metal. We're not deathcore. But the audience and the outside world was like, nah, you're deathcore.
Yeah.
And it's still to this day, it's part of the curse of getting to be so successful at such a young age, so fast, so much virility off the bat, to be known for this deathcore thing that like to this day, despite how technical or non-core our records are, we still get the moniker. They'll put us on a Spotify deathcore playlist, and we're like,
well, yeah, maybe it's only by association to that era of the heyday of core bands. I don't know.
Yep.
But
True.
honestly, for me, this is the only band of its generation and community that evolved into something else and shed the skin of its sound. Of course, there are a few names that evolved, but in a smaller case. But for Job For A Cowboy, definitely is the most venturous one, in my opinion. And I think that this has earned a cult-like status for the band among the fans, And
sure.
I don't know. I think maybe evolving artistically is not being necessarily concerned with getting more successful commercially speaking.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think that the industry and the audience itself doesn't reward a band that is trying to innovate and move forward musically,
So true. Very, very, very true. You just kind of summarized Job's whole career trajectory, Yeah, I mean, it felt like the death metal scene didn't want to let JFAC in, right? Because that's that core band. And then the core fans were like, hey, where's our breeze? You know, where's our breakdowns? So we kind of like, you saw the band, you know, be on this super upward trajectory with Doom, and very easily could have just kept releasing material like that and probably, I don't know, be fucking retired or something now. Like the trajectory was so high, they could have been one of the biggest bands in extreme metal, and but they chose to not go down that path, and they wanted to make something different. And so I don't think that, you know, with Ruination, it started getting even grindier when Al Glassman came in, and then after Ruination, I joined the band, and at the same time, me and Tony Santacandro joined the band. And so the very first thing that I did with the band was Gloom, the Gloom EP, and it was like a very blatant statement in itself, even that this wasn't even the same band from Genesis and Ruination. That it was this like hyper tech bass being a lot busier. Tony's lines are just insane. The leads are definitely not weak once we reach that point. But again, it was still, you know, that led into Demonocracy, and Demonocracy started to get some of the elements that of the direction that we ended up going and where we really wanted to go, which was like Tarnished Gluttony, you know, the last song on Demonocracy. And that's like, I think the trajectory, if you follow the band's songs and listen through the discography, once you get to Tarnished Gluttony, once you get to the end of Demonocracy, like that's like, okay, this is who we are. Yeah. And that's where I feel like with Sun Eater, we were able to sort of finally break out of that. Oh, you're not deathcore, so the deathcore fans aren't into it,
right?
But we're not accepting you into, you know, into the tech death realm either, right? And because it's maybe you're trying too hard to not be deathcore, so it just sounds like you're just like playing technical for technicality's sake. But with Sun Eater, I feel like we were able to be like, this is a record we wanted to make. And without any external pressure, like let's make that record. Like let's just have fun. Let's just do that. And I think that it finally landed, and it finally like gave the band its true home, you know. And I think that even opened up some of the Doom fans were even like, wow, I get down on this. I actually like this. There's space. It breathes. It's not just fucking insane, crazy tech blasting the whole time. And then the death metal people finally were like, oh shit, this is actually good, you know? And I think it's just because we'd really kind of found and locked into our identity. And then, so we put that out and then went away immediately for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I want to address both albums specifically.
Sure.
Because looking back to the Monocracy feels like the end of an era for the band, you know, like a pivotal moment for getting into more expansive compositions, especially, of course, Tarnished Gluttony. So I appreciate that you mentioned that, because it agrees with my experience of the band through the years. And I remember the conversations I had with my friends at the time in college, where, like, of course, they have this new bassist who also plays in Cephalic Carnage. It makes sense, you know? So sure. He naturally expanded the band's sonic palette and complexity. I mean, we gave you a lot of credit to that. So
thank you.
I want to ask you, how confident were you in your input or contributing to the band from the outset?
So at first, as far as like from a writing perspective, it was real interesting because you come into a situation, you know, a band that's been around. I mean, at that point, they'd been around 6-7 years-ish or something like that. But you're stepping into a situation where you're with people you've never. I mean, I hadn't even met Johnny before, you know. So it was kind of crazy, jumping right in, not touring first, not like writing and jamming together, but immediately jump into recording. Yeah. And so it was kind of interesting because it was really more play along with, you know, what Sukoff and I were coming up with. So I kind of like didn't quite fully, I guess, like embed myself into, or embed like my real personality and what I wanted to play.
Okay.
I was trying to kind of like, but at the same time, that's why they wanted me. You know, they wanted me to come in and be busy. And so there was very few parts that we would record that they would be like, can you change that? You know, for the most part, that we would come in, listen to it, and they'd be like, whoa, that's fucking sick. Right on, you
Right.
know? So, but very specifically, like there's parts like in, I shouldn't say that now that I remember it now. Like Gloom has this song Plastic Idols, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I did a like a bass cover of it on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And it was funny too because at the time, you know, whenever you replace like an iconic member of a band, especially somebody like Brent, who's very noticeable with his red hair and his, you know, gauged ears and all that stuff. So people are like, "Where's Brent?" You know what I mean? You always get that, "Where's Brent?" Or, you know, whoever the member is. So I did the video as Brent, which
What?
is pretty fun. Yeah, you have to check it out. It's a Plastic Idols bass playthrough. And
Okay.
I just had my girlfriend does like special effects makeup and stuff. We didn't spend a ton of time on it, but like, you know, I dressed up like him and it was pretty ridiculous. He sent me a message about it. We were laughing about it. He's like, "Oh man, that was great." It was like, you know, Saturday Night Live of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that song I remember even specifically having a part that was very cool, and they let me pop up in the mix quite a bit with it. You know,
Mm.
da 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 ba ba da 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 da. Yeah, and I guess I was getting, yeah, even back then I was getting in a lot of my stuff, you know, kind of Ryan isms, you know, just
Okay.
chords playing, you know, chorded playing or octaves, and some double thumb slap stuff. All the way back then I was actually getting it in. So I take that back. I was in the forefront from the beginning. I think it was just sonically didn't really get to where I wanted to be with the tone of my bass
Okay.
and the mix, the level of the bass in the mix till Sun Eater.
I think that also has to do with being confident with your decisions, maybe.
That could be, yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
uh,
I mean, it was being confident with in asking for it too, because they were
right.
always putting. I never really liked adding Sans Amp to my tone, or you know, eventually it became Dark Glass. Sans Amp's still around, but Dark Glass really came in and you know, everybody's got one of those pedals and they're amazing, but I never really liked that in my tone. You know, like I like a little bit if it's to try to bite out, but I love the way that clean bass sounds,
Hmm.
just how it fills your gut, you know, and especially those highly compressed, naturally compressed woods like Bubinga and Ovencall and you know my Warwicks and my MTDs, and so it was. I remember the time being in the at Jason's and talking with Johnny, and we were about to start bass tracking for Sun Eater,
Okay.
and Johnny was like. I was kind of like, I don't want to put the Sans Amp on it. You know, like, I really want to go for, you know, a different tone, like the tone I want. And he was like, well, he's like, what's your favorite bass record? What's your favorite bass tone? And I was
Hmm.
like, LD50. And
Okay.
you kind of like, you know, because it was a new metal band, you're kind of like, oh, you like new metal, you know? But he was like, are you serious? And I thought he was like, gonna make fun of me, but he was like, "That's my favorite bass tone of all time," and I was like, "What the fuck are we doing here, bro?" So it was just being like, "Okay, we're going for the honk, man. We're gonna. I want to put no distortion. I want clean bass." And it was just putting my foot down on that and having Johnny be cool with it, because if he wasn't, I mean, you know, that would have been a problem.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you about what sort of album inspired you to put this work into the Sun Eater, because it sounds so peculiar. It's interesting that it came from that record to know that. And
Sure.
honestly, to speaking with you now feels like full cycle thing for me, because that song, Tarnish Gluttony, and that album mean a lot for me and my friends at the time.
That's awesome,
And
man.
well, at the time we didn't know what would come next, Sun Eater, but that album sort of solidified our expectation of the band. I mean,
Ah,
it was a new total surprise. We couldn't guess what that album is, you know.
right.
Um, but I think that album, the whole band reached to a new point or to a new level in its game. But of course, more notable in the bass work.
Right.
So well, I think that that album is very special. I think the scale is massive, And can you elaborate on the internal shifts with the band from Democracy to the creation of Sun Eater, or
Sure.
what changed both creatively and collaboratively
Sure.
facilitated this evolution?
Sure. Yeah. So, we were on tour. We were hitting a bunch of tours. We were really busy, and some of them were like kind of tougher tours that were very long, and we were like opening for Dying Fetus. What seemed like every tour felt like we were doing that. And then we did this kind of a rougher tour in Russia because it was just like 16-hour drives. Almost every day was just like these very, Russia's very big. And so we were just on these super long drives and bumpy and crazy drivers. And the roads were so bumpy and the shocks in the van that we were in were so bad that you couldn't watch movies on the hard drive would skip. So we couldn't watch movies either. So we would tell stories.
Okay.
Like we started telling each other like, "Oh, have you ever seen Star Wars?" Like, "No, I've never seen it." And I'm like, "Okay, here's what happens." And they would like tell each. It was kind of crazy, but we kind of had these cool kind of bonding moments like that, and just kind of realizing, being on stage playing the stuff that we were playing, and it was when we came into the Mayhem Fest, because like we were in kind of a unique place as a band where we were feeling the effects of like not being. Basically, like the core fans not being down, so the numbers were not there as far as like the listening base. And then, people kind of, like you were saying, the industry not really accepting somebody reaching out and trying to, shed their skin and change their sound. So it was kind of a weird spot for the band. And then the Mayhem tour came along and just totally reinvigorated us because it was like, ooh, all of a sudden we're back. In the limelight again, and had a great slot, and out touring with Mastodon and Rob Zombie and Machine Head, and you're making all these friends and all this stuff, and so we were kind of in a unique headspace during that tour, and we knew that we had it was time for another record to come up, and so we were like, let's do something fucking different. They're like, let's make there was this one thing. Where we were like, kind of had like a mission statement for what the album was going to be. And it was like, we wanted to have guest vocals for the first time. We wanted to have, futuristic tones. And we just kind of knew that we wanted to do something different. And we knew what the concept was going to be from the get, which is kind of rare. With Cephalic, with Havoc, with... Job for a Cowboy. Like it was like usually before that, like you write songs and then the singer Johnny will come up with some topics and then you end up finding some similarity amongst all the topics and then naming the album something that ties everything together, right? So with this, we knew what we were going to write about this person and this journey that this person went on, and so. I think that just kind of inspired it from the start differently. Like we started coming up with topics that we knew that this person had these like really unique, crazy viewpoints on. And so it was just kind of, the whole process was just more about what we really wanted to do rather than what you think you're supposed to do, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so, and then tone wise, it was great. Charn had throughout that tour decided he was leaving the band. And it was, cordial, but he's like, this is my last tour and I don't want to do the next record. And, so we were like, okay. So we were digging around thinking of drummers and we were like, man, who can we get? Who do we want to get that's going to match this style that we're writing? And, we thought fucking, Danny Walker, dude. I was like, his hands are so tasty. Some of my, Intronaut's got some of my favorite. He's just such a, I remember watching Danny play with Danny Carey from Tool. Tool brought Intronaut out, and he would bring Danny Walker out on stage, set up his kit, and they would jam Lateralis together. And Danny always just had such tasty work. I was just like, kind of blown away by his playing. So to get him to play was brilliant. You know, it was really awesome for us to like have that level of even the communication in the songs when we're in the studio being like, can you give us that like Sean Reinhardt, you know, tinkery, you know, some splash work, some little closed open hi-hat stuff. And like, it flowed really well, you know, and it seemed to fit really well. So we kind of like really got into the groove of recording that record. And then, as it started to come out, I remember being like, I wanted to make it more to a little conversation about that at Jason's, but they were kind of like, just trust the process basically. And then after we put bass on it, and I was able to have no distortion on the bass, and then like have the bass be up in the mix. And then I was like, oh, it all makes sense. You know, there's room for everybody we're all kind of like having a conversation, but having the, I guess, musical maturity to know when it's your turn to speak or not. You know what I mean?
As you were speaking about Sun Eater and the process, I have a similar anecdote talking with Adam Biggs of Rivers of Nile.
Oh, cool.
Which, you know, I mean, they have this album called, I forget the name right now, but it came a year later of Sun Eater, and you get a lot of comparison to that album. And it's funny that the circumstances are similar. What I mean is, sorry, can you speak? I hear you very low.
Check. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's this cable must be whack.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he was talking about their last record not getting enough track, and pretty much the label going like dark on them. Well, maybe like the expectation were low for the band, you know.
Okay. Right.
So the band thought, okay, maybe this is our last record. Let's do whatever we want, you know. And that album came out, which by now, I'm blanking on the name. Is the
is
one
it called
with
The Work?
The one before that.
The Where Owls Know My Name?
Before that.
Before both those. Okay. I'll have to look it up. I can't remember the one, but
it's my favorite, and I'm blanking on the name right now.
Okay, no worries.
Well, yeah, so it's funny that the circumstances were similar, you know.
Yeah.
And the outcome was better for it. You know, the band just not paying interest in the industry, you know, in itself, and just doing whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And by now the band has evolved in a way we just couldn't guess, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe there's something to like the authenticity of like making something that you really want to make. It's difficult because like, you know, like for Cephalic Carnage right now, we're you know 14 years late on making a new record, and but we have all this music. There's like a hour and a half at least of music, like guitar parts that are kind of worked out, and but you kind of start like with all that at the time. You're like, oh well, what should it sound like? What's it gonna be like? You know, like you have all this external pressure, you know, that's built up about what it's supposed to sound like, or well, now it's got to be the best record we ever write because after 14 years, you can't put out something that's, you know, not the best. So it's interesting to like once you like with Sun Eater, where we kind of like didn't give a shit. You know, it's like that. Like we don't care what anybody else thinks. This is what we want to make. And I think that there's an authenticity in that maybe like, you know, makes its way into the record and people can feel that, you know, this is something that you wanted to make, not something that was like, I don't know. It's a weird process because like, it's not like, maybe it's just subconscious, making the subconscious decision to be like, it's going to come out however it's going to come out. And we're just going to do what we love and make it something that we like, you know? And then, because sometimes you're in the rigmarole of the 2-year album cycle, which is always like you get kind of pushed into this 2-year album cycle by just the nature of touring, and I think like you can kind of like that's what was so cool is to be able to kind of step back for a very long time and, you know, I guess let ideas really fully ferment, you know, which was kind of the cool break for us about having that much time to work on what would become Moon Healer.
I have a question for that
Uh-huh.
because, well, and it's a special circumstance for you having both bands in a hiatus or returning for a prolonged hiatus.
Yeah.
Um, okay, having Sun Eater on the back, there's anticipation and a big expectation for the band,
Yep.
around that album.
Yep.
Um, so with an album that pretty much encapsulates the peak of the band, first fans are left wondering, was it the wait worth it, for the following
Right.
album? So
Right.
how did you or the band ensure that the album lived up to the expectations?
Yeah, that was a big thing for us. Like again, like no time pressure. Normally it's like, oh, you got 3 months to write. We need to be in the studio in January. That the record's coming out this time of the year. We didn't have any of that, So in that aspect of it, you're like, oh, it's very freeing because we can take as much time as we want. That can also be a bad thing though too. You know what I mean? Like, because you probably have heard this before, but it's almost like a record is never really done. It's just turned in.
Right.
Because you can always still keep refining and doing different stuff, and we probably might have taken longer on this record had we not had finally our manager and the label being like, okay, we got to we got to get this done. So but so the pressure really wasn't there till the very very end, and that but or the time pressure of a time crunch wasn't there, but there was that mounting inverse time pressure of like, oh, now it's been 8 years, or back when we were first starting to get this go, we were like, oh, it's 2018, 2019. And so we're like, oh shit, it's been 5 years. That's a lot of time in between it. Like, is this going to live up to Sun Eater? Like, we have to make something it's got to be at least as good as Sun Eater. And then knowing that it was going to be a sequel record actually kind of helped a bit actually with that, because thematically, conceptually, we knew exactly what we wanted to do, which made it easier to get the artwork done fast, and we even had the artwork well before the record was finished. So we had, that was kind of cool because it was almost like the artwork was influencing the music,
Right.
but it was a really kind of a different time. That never really usually gets to happen. But so we would consistently pull up Sun Eater. Like, I was listening to it. I always liked that record. I listened to it a lot, and but really was like fine-tooth comb listening to it again to use it as a comparison between the new songs. So we listen to a new song, or listen to the whole batch of the new songs, and then listen to Sun Eater and be like, are we there? Are we in the ballpark? Do they sound like they're friends at least, if not like sisters, or a sequel record? And so I think it kind of remains to be seen. To see. I think in general for us, I'm like, I think we did it. I really like this record a lot. I think it's a little more everything than Sun Eater. There's parts that are heavier, I think, than Sun Eater. There's parts that are proggier. There's definitely a lot more parts that are a lot more technical. The bass is a lot crazier. I think the drums are crazier. Johnny really upped his vocal game quite a bit as well. And so in general, I'm like, okay, I think we pulled it off, but I'm still waiting for, and I'm kind of getting it now with people who've had the advanced copies, but I think it's really got to be one of those things where it's like in 6 months, after it's out 6 months, what are people's perceptions of it then? I don't think we'll know if it stands up to the test of time till after,
Right.
because at first it's going to be like, oh, it's fucking amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are going to really love it. I'm going to be like, okay, but in 6 months, okay, now is it in the same realm as Sun Eater, hopefully better? You would like to get better as a band, but I think thinking about it as sisters is cool, because then it's like, well, there's not a better sister.
Right. You're right. It's part. These both records are part of the same trip, but different.
Yeah.
In
Exactly.
in its own individuality.
Right.
I think it's important, and now that you're saying this, that you and the band use Sun Eater as a guiding principle for the creating process, because this, and in my mind, is like this record functions like a reaction to Sun Eater. It's almost opposite, while retaining the same flow or the ideas.
Ah, yeah.
And and for me, this sounds like a recollection of the best parts of the band, the Monocracy and Sun Eater, in the sense that it never messes with the flow, but it displays all the tonal complexity, all the flows and nuances, all of that. But I think it takes less time to get to the point of the songs
Sure.
without sacrificing the dynamic range and the motifs for what
Wow.
the band is celebrated for, And I mean, in my experience, Steel Records goes in the blink of an eye. I often are left wondering, is it finished yet? I mean, there's not any more songs because
Yeah.
it goes so quickly. And yeah, I haven't listened to the record for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 times by now.
Oh, wow.
Just enjoying
Damn.
the record.
Oh,
Dude,
that's awesome.
is in my opinion, I think people will think of this record as less busy, well, maybe less prog album because of the time signatures and the room to read that the Sun Eater has, which
Sure.
this record almost doesn't miss one bit in that regard, But
Sure.
if you pay attention, all is there, It's just fucking massive, man.
Oh, thank you, man. That's cool. I loved, especially when people have obviously listened to the record at least, twice or something, or 3 times before we talk about it. But it's cool when somebody's really dug in and heard it that many times, because now it's like peeling the layers of an onion, and like there's lots of like candy tracks in there. Like there's some parts, there's like 3-4 guitar things going on at once. And so you really can't take it all in the first time. I hope it's still dynamic enough that people can take in one listen and like it, sometimes I think when, and especially with technical death metal, right, you can get so dense that like one listen you're like, it's just too much steak to eat at once, dude, but hopefully, I mean, I guess if I had to trade, be like, oh, you could listen to it once and like it, or it's one of those records that like the more you listen to it, the more it grows on you. I think I would probably take that, because then it becomes just more iconic for people, or more connected to you, like,
I think that this record is an instant like, but it takes time to fully develop connection with the songs, to identify what makes it unique and special, because these are busy songs,
Right.
And in my opinion, what my first thought when I listened to even the first singles was like, okay, the band was actually missed for, this sound is, there's no sound out there, no band has this kind of qualities to their music. And nowadays, and maybe this is what has been the case through the years, but genres or music exist between branches or models of styles, and there are a few names that kind of evade that realm of, being niche. And for me, Job For A Cowboy is one of them, and this record shows that the band try to do something new while retaining the best of their sound. And I think it's important that, well, this is again my opinion,
Sure,
that this record does not try to surpass the experience of Sun Eater. It leaves it be,
sure,
and
right,
come up with a new experience for the listener. And this for me is evolution.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That's one of the coolest ways I've heard it put. That's kind of like thinking about where we want to go in the future too, is to be like, there's stuff that didn't make it on this record that there's like, I think like almost maybe 3 songs that didn't make it on the record, because we were making sure that everything had to fit and make sense, not just in Moon Healers as sense, but for it to make sense with Sun Eater too, to being this kind of sister record. Because we're like, well, we can't put 12 songs out. It's supposed to be roughly the same, time experience as Sun Eater was. But so some of the stuff, there's one thing that's like one of the coolest things Tony's written on guitar. It's this clean guitar line that it's just very sick, and I built it into this kind of crazy, moody track that we couldn't end up fitting on this one. It just didn't make sense. It could have made sense. We just didn't have time. We literally did at that point be like, I can't, this would take 2 days to get this going. We can't do it. So, but that's like, I think what we'll maybe start the next record with. And, it is so cool and moody. And I think like that is a good direction of where we want to go, is to really get into that, like, I don't want to say Cult of Luna-y, but like just super moody stuff. Like I love that side, like the Son of Nihility intro, and like some of the elements on this record, like even in the Forever Rot, those like really eerie, weird guitar tone lands. It's just like, I just love that, like creating that atmosphere. It's like we're always gonna have it's always gonna be heavy. You're always gonna get that. So I'm not worried about focusing on making that come out. Like that's naturally gonna come out. So what I think it would be cool to just get really weird, with it, and go further out down that road and be like, let's find out where we end up. Who knows? I mean, Tony's playing a lot of the stuff he's sending tracks right now, even, like there's a couple tracks that he's like, hey, check out what I've been working on. We're like, oh shit, we're like already starting the next record. And it's all, and he's doing it like with a 6-string Strat, like not even doing the heavy or dropped E. I think he's playing in E standard Strat. So who knows where the stuff will end up sounding. You know what I mean?
So there's future for the band ahead.
Yep.
With new material.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had fun making this, and it was like, has been honestly a part of our lives for like the last at least 6 years.
Wow.
Of putting this, always working on it, staying in touch with each other. Johnny and I talk like every day, and it's like, it would be weird to just be like, okay, the record's out, we'll go play some shows. And then, it's like, I think we just need to, it's like a part of my life now, of like writing and listening to new stuff and making suggestions on it and playing with parts. And so I think it would be really fun to not take 10 years to write another record,
I'm looking at the artwork now, and I think we can do a sort of comparison with the music in the sense that there's a lot of elements there, but not one of them caught your full attention. You have to look at the full picture, the full palette of colors. And this is the type of record that you have to pay attention to the full picture.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. I wonder if, like we were talking about how I had the artwork before we finished writing, and I wonder if like that made its way in subconsciously somehow,
I want to ask you about the themes. This is something that I honestly identify to the psychedelic experience and having these experiences.
Sure.
So I want to ask you about the approach, if it's a positive way of thinking, because the way David described in the press is like almost a negative thing to do, to immerse yourself in these experiences. But at the end, he mentions this. Let me read it for you. That some of the drugs they consumed open these realities that evolution has closed the door on,
Right.
And of course, this is a very dangerous thing to do, because almost made you trivialize important things in life, if you let yourself in that way.
Sure.
But yeah, what is your take on this themes?
Sure. I'm definitely more of a proponent for obviously like legalization, but just the incredible well of positive effects that can flow from some of these chemicals. I think that it's obvious that you need to make sure you don't have a predisposition for psychosis in your family or schizophrenia or any kind of like things like that, and so if you do or whatever, like to do this stuff in conjunction with a therapist, which you can now in a lot of states. You can do ketamine therapy, you can do therapist assisted psilocybin sessions. And that is definitely like, okay, if you're concerned about it, do it with a professional. I mean, the chemicals themselves, a lot of the times are not, depending upon which one it is, but pretty difficult to overdose on it. But it's just like anything else. If you do it in moderation, test it out first. If you think you can fly, start from the ground first. Don't go to a building and jump off of it.
Yeah.
But I would say that I think overall, it's and especially like the concept even of this one was like the healer aspect of the moon. You know, we were digging into some of these archetypes and some of the I guess the commonalities that people experience in some of these trips and some of these experiences where the moon was sort of a, I don't want to say like full out benevolent, but it was like an ally. You know, like the moon is was on your side, so to speak, healing, you know, versus the sun, which is, you know, burns you, right? It's kind of
Right.
so, you know, even the, you know, the sun gave me ashes, so I sought out the moon, you know, and so, but I think that we like to keep this, and I know Johnny does this, and I'm really grateful that he does it, like kind of keeping things opaque in
Okay.
the lyrics, you know, so that we really you don't know exactly what happens to this character, you know. Does he find enlightenment? You know,
Right.
it's possible, you know, and then if you take it, if you interpret it that way, yeah, he goes on this insane journey, and like, you know, hypothetically, things might have fallen apart in his real life, but he achieved spiritual enlightenment, or he got to, you know, to meet, you know, whatever it is, the entities were, you know, if it was a godlike entity or consciousness, aliens or something like that. But you don't know if it's that or if he's dead, and these are, you know, this is the afterlife that he's in, or if it was all just one long strange trip. You know, it's kind of open to interpretation, but I think it's like the benevolent side of things. I mean, the good side of things that you can experience, the spiritual growth that you can, and the meanings that you can acquire in these experiences. But also, you know, if you stay there too long, you know,
Right. Right.
if you're avoiding actual reality in order to just be always over there, like it's just like anything else, like too much, you know, too much can be a bad thing, you know. So I think it's kind of slightly open to, when I, like, for example, for me, when I read it and when I listen to the stuff, I sort of take the benevolent side of it. I think it's a good, like an overall good experience that this person went through, where, or at least just real. You know what I mean? Like there's the balance in it,
Yeah.
and that's just my personal interpretation of the lyrics. I think that that's important to keep open for yourself these days, you know, because when things are super transparent and you tell everybody exactly what every song is, it leaves no room for you making your own personal connection to the art.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I mean, like I've said this in a few interviews, but have you ever listened to a song for like 25 years of your life that you love, but you never looked at the lyrics, you never read the lyrics, but you have them kind of what you think are the lyrics in your
Yeah.
head,
Yeah.
and then you finally actually do look at the lyrics, and you're like, oh, that's not what
Like,
that's not as cool as what was in my head.
like
You
it
know, it's like,
destroys the notion of the
right,
song.
yeah, and then the song's different forever for you from that. So I'm also kind of like, you know, leave some room for interpretation as to, you know, I mean, a great trip can be just as horrifying as it is mystifying and enlightening.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's kind of you run the whole gamut.
People think of these bad trips of being, you know, that bad, but I think that this is necessary for you to correct in your life. What these experiences show for yourself, these are things that you have to correct to do right, you know.
Right.
And back to the moon thing, I think, yeah, this is something like a light in the dark, the moon,
There you go.
the way it heals. And of course, you have to do this thing with respect and with a purpose. For example, in my mind, in my experience, I started this thing with self-destruction attitudes. You know, I was in depression, but
Yeah.
quickly I realized that there was more to it. You know,
Sure.
and I want to make a connection with the song "Tarnish Gluttony,"
Yeah.
which talks about walk blindlessly. You know,
Right.
to the social capitalism and the way the world works.
Sure.
And for example, I think experiences like this, spiritual enlightenment or so, offers you a way to be aware of how the world functions and the things that are at play. So
Sure.
for me, it's like an honest segue from one part of the band. Like it was organic path for the band to kind of what's the word? criticize
Sure.
that part of our societies, and then go with this thing that helps us, break the mold.
Sure. Yeah.
Be
No,
your
that makes a lot of sense. Honestly, I've never even thought of that. Like, because we put that song last on the record because of the vibe and the feel of it. Kind of like Runation on Runation had that. You put the big, long, slow, moody record closer. But I didn't ever really think about that tie, between like the this, love of a or at least like the realization about the detriments of fractional reserve banking, but that leading its way into Sun Eater. I never thought about like, that's kind of like the path towards realization, That's
right.
cool, man. I like that a lot, dude. That's very
Well,
sick.
I have a few questions for you. One
Sure.
is about the future of the band. You mentioned that maybe it's Cult of Luna-esque, which sounds pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
So do you or the band is open to experiment with outside elements of your, as of now, music vocabulary in order to become something greater that
Sure.
the
Yeah.
band is now?
Yeah. I mean, I always love pedals. I have a lot of cool bass pedals, and they've never really made their way onto any records. And I think it'd be really fun to just do some experimenting. But that's the thing, is like I wouldn't want to just willy nilly it though. Like if we're gonna
Mm,
do it, if we're gonna go someplace, we're gonna spend the time and do the due diligence and do it right. So I'm kind of actually super. It's like the more I've been finishing up my press for Moon Healer here, and I'm like, it's kind of, I'm at like the end of like 3 weeks of the press, right? And I'm like, okay, this is weird. I'm seeing the shift towards the actual record release, and then
mm-hmm,
now that's going to be in the past, like very shortly.
mm,
And so all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we put this out when, not, oh, it's coming out, or is it going to come out? I don't know, forever, right? That's how like I've lived in that spot for the last 8 years, realizing like, oh, this massive body of work we spent all this time on I'm finally at the shifting point from is going to come out, or
mm.
worrying if it's going to come out, to is out. We put that out back in February of 2024. But it's cool because it's like, it's almost like freeing up the space in my mind for new stuff, to be like, okay, what are we going to make now? And
Right.
that's really exciting, because like normally you'd be like, that took 8 years, that took 10 fucking years. I'm going to take a break for a couple. I'm instantly like, where could we go next? And some of the stuff that like that one piece of music on the next thing, I'm like, it makes me really excited, because I'm like, that's where I want to go. I want to take it into weirder places, into like the unknown. To
Right.
just kind of continually, like, I don't know what we're gonna mess with. I don't know what it's gonna sound like, but I know that it's gonna be weird.
So, as you are in that headspace of being weird and experiment with stuff, what records that you have encountered later, or these days, or I don't know,
Sure,
over the past years, offered you like a door or inspiration for that
sure.
path?
It's funny. Johnny is like super uh up to date on his music. He's always sending me shit. And he sent me some pretty interesting stuff. One of the bands I think that's doing some crazy stuff is Igor, with
Right.
the 3 R's. And then I've been getting into like a lot of like it's funny that Leprous is another one.
Okay.
Alessandro Venturelli sent me that. But as far as like the moods and stuff, really, I've been getting into like more like composers, like
Mm,
Hans Zimmer,
mm,
and John Williams. So like I'll listen to like the Interstellar soundtrack, like the scoring for it, shit like that, where it's like those are moods. You know what I mean? Like that's emotive, like to evoke emotion. I think that's the primary goal of any art. I think is to share a feeling,
mm-hmm,
to try to get it to come across. And so with music, I think that as we progress and get older and stuff, like to me, that's what matters more than anything is, making you feel something. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like my big like interesting thing right now is like not necessarily so much bands, but like other places to get musical inspiration from, like films and stuff. Just noticing how the scoring of a film will affect the mood of the scene. It's like you can completely change the mood of a scene by changing the music. It's like the music has that power, and so I like I've been kind of going down that road and listening to more like soundscapes, even.
Have you listened to the Work album by Days of Night?
No, wait, I think I did do that one.
Because
I'm loading it in now so that I can make sure that
I think that album shows exactly the things that you're describing here, sacrificing something
okay.
in for the sake of the mood, finding a new thing.
Ah,
So I think,
okay. I did listen to this like a little bit, but I've never done it like fully. Listen at night with headphones and pay attention. So I'm gonna do that.
right, right, yeah. I mean, the band with this album do sonic field recording.
Oh, cool.
Lot of basic things here, but it's digestible,
Oh,
which I
cool.
think I think is a good thing. Okay, we can think of Sun Eater and Moon, or especially Moon, like a closing chapter of this era of the band.
I think
And
so. I mean, we've thought about like this story doesn't necessarily have to be over.
right,
Um, it could carry on, but I don't know if it needs to. And like that's kind of like that's the question that we'll figure out is um would we want to bring it into like a three record concept? I don't know though, because like it's like sun and moon. It's kind of complete, like it's like a yin and yang. It'd be like adding a third thing to the yin and yang. So I think I don't know. We'll have to see, but I would almost rather like I still like doing the concepts. I think that's really dope. I think maybe it might be fun to do like start a new concept that maybe is like two records of sun, moon, and then something and something. Some just to and then go in a different direction. You know what I mean? But it's weird. It's almost sad to think about that. Like oh, it's weird. Time is weird. I heard this. Sean Lennon put this quote up the other day. I thought it was brilliant. He said, "Is nostalgia just another form of depression?" And I was like, "Wow, that's a unique question."
yeah.
Like you think about it, I'm like, it's just kind of crazy that I'm like, oh, coming to the end of that era of that time thing, and be like, especially just something that you put so much work into for so long, so much anticipation, and then like, oh, okay, it's out. It's about to be out. We got like 2 weeks left. So
Yeah.
it's crazy to think about. But like I said, it does me excited for new music.
Well, the album is great. Honestly, that is
Thank you
my own
so
my own
much.
stake. People will enjoy it for sure.
Thank you, man.
One last question: if you could relate or assimilate what you have in your mind of this album, the things that it evokes for you, with another form of work that already exists, like a movie, a painting, or a book, which one would it be and why?
Ooh. Let's see. That's a really, really great question, man. I'm gonna say it's to me, I feel like this could almost be a soundtrack to Altered States. The
Oh,
the movie Altered States, because a lot of the elements that this character goes through, if you look at look at the movie, this guy is on a quest to find like the root of consciousness via hallucinogens,
mhm.
and maybe he's going a little too far and fucking losing himself.
Mm.
So I would say it's almost that would be the piece I would say like is a companion piece would be the movie Altered States. I wonder if that'll be cool to line it up with some of the parts. I wonder if it'd be kind of like Wizard of Oz and Dark Side
Yeah,
of the Moon.
it could be interesting. Well, it occurs to me now as you describe the themes of the album, the psychedelic realm. I don't know if you're familiar with Terence McKenna
Oh yes, yeah. We
and
referenced a lot of his stuff in this.
Dennis McKenna, the two brothers, you know?
Yes, yeah. The
So
Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss.
exactly. So there are two sides of the psychedelic experience with them. Terence was like, listen to the message, hang out the phone, you know?
Yeah.
And Dennis is like, take up the phone and start the conversation. You never end that conversation, you know, it's staying in
Ah,
touch with that message. I don't know what your take
that's
on that.
that's brilliant. I love that. Um, I've never read any of Dennis's stuff. I think I got that. I maybe have it in my Kindle or something. That the Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss.
Mm,
But it's so wild to go listen. I got True Hallucinations, his
right.
book, and he was like 20 something, like early 20s, and his fucking vocabulary, and it was just like mind blowing. What a brilliant mind. Um, I think I've kind of actually been probably more on the pick up the phone, get the message, and then hang up side
Right.
of it. But I think it's like, well, I'm almost like thinking maybe it would have been better to stay on the call, because the insights that you get, like the realizations, like the ego melt
Mm,
that happens, um, it's fleeting. It's pretty quick that all the layers pop back on, and we're sort of back in the veil of Maya. You know,
right. Yeah.
I think that like it's like you just, if you're gonna pick up the phone, answer it, get the message, and then hang up. It's like you just need to do that call more often then,
Right.
rather than like, I think like if you stay on the phone too long, then it might be kind of like the record, you know what I mean, or Altered Statement, like you might go too far, it might be too lost to reality, to actual
Right.
grounded reality.
Right. I mean, I admire Terence honestly. The linguistic dominion of that guy, you know, it's an experience
Brilliant.
just listening to him.
That was
Okay.
really well worded. The Linguistic Dominion. That's a fucking cool band name, dude.
Yeah. Well, and the linguistic dominion of your sound here, it's flawless, man.
Oh, thank you so much, man. Really
Well, hope
appreciate it.
hope to talk to you again in the future
Yeah,
for our
for
next
sure. Where
album.
where where in Mexico are you?
Right now in Sonora.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I might be down there with a band sometime in like May or June or something.
Or
I'm
in
gonna play.
Mexico.
Yeah. I think we're doing like
Nice.
four or five shows. So I can't say who it is yet, but I'll stay in touch with you if we come down there. Maybe we can get a beer or something, or
Yeah, for
you know,
sure, for sure.
eat some mushrooms and go climb some pyramids.
I have to ask you, there is a new material of Cephalic Carnage coming out sometime in the future.
Trying our best, man. It's pot is legal here now, and so you know that was kind of the point of the band. No, I'm gonna try to say what needs to happen is we have to book studio time with Dave
Okay.
Otero. Like that's what needs to happen, because that will put the pressure under. All right, let's pick which one of these songs we're gonna do. Let's get this done. Um, but it's kind of an impasse with that, because Steve doesn't want to do that. Steve's like, no, everything needs to be written and jammed through before we book studio time. And
Okay.
I'm like, well, then it's never going to happen. At the rate we're going, I think we need some kind of pressure to put
Right.
some fire underneath us to get it out. Because, I'm doing an interview talking about, oh shit, it's been 10 years since Job did a record. Fuck, it's fucking 14 since Folic. And we're not even, so I would think maybe, you know, 2026. Be cool if we could get it done and put it out in 2025. Be like 15 years, 10 years for Job, 15 years for Folic. keep the numbers round.
At least for you. Well, okay. Thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure. See you next time.